Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you chose to spend some time here. It's Thanksgiving week. Can you even believe it? I've got my turkey in the fridge and my pumpkin pie recipe ready to go. To make your Thanksgiving get-togethers a little more fun, or to inspire conversation in some awkward silence, go over to girlstalkinglife.com for my free downloadable conversation cards. Just sign up for the newsletter and I'll send you the cards, and you can add them to your Thanksgiving table. If you like what you're hearing on Girls Talking Life, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We are also on Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Play. Then every other Monday when a new episode is released, it automatically updates for you and you don't have to go looking for it. My guest on the show today is Kris Camealy. Kris is a sequin-wearing homeschooling mother of 4. She is passionate about Jesus, people, and words, and her favorite room in her house is her kitchen. Kris is the author of Come Lord Jesus, The Weight of Waiting, and Holey, 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 A Lenten Journey of Refinement. She has contributed to numerous other books and is the director of Refine, The Retreat. Today, Kris and I are talking all about Advent. It starts on Sunday, friends. Talking with Kris got me more excited and ready to prepare my heart and my home for the things to come this season. Kris shares not only some practical ideas on observing Advent, but why she ended up writing a book about it and how it was really what she needed at that time. Kris tells us how she struggles with waiting, and don't we all? And we talk about God's timing and how the waiting can really be a gift. Kris also gives us a sneak peek into her new book on surrender. Here is my conversation with Kris. Hi there, Kris. Thank you for joining me on the show this morning.
Thank you. It's so fun to be with you.
Can you start by telling us who you are and then how you spend your days?
Yeah, I am a stay-at-home mom. I write from home, freelance work. I homeschool. I have 4 kids who I am shepherding through their education as best we can. I've been married to my husband for 20 years, and we live in Central Ohio, which is it feels like home now. I grew up moving all over. My dad was military, so I moved every 2 years about. And so Ohio is officially home. We are staying put, I think. Yeah, that's just a little snapshot.
So you are a writer, a speaker. You are the director of a retreat. You have all these things under your belt. How did you get started in all this, and kind of where did it begin?
Oh gosh, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I've always loved writing since I was little. I started writing, I think, really in 3rd grade. I had a teacher who really encouraged me to write. I was actually having a lot of trouble connecting with kids in my class that year. I don't know why. I think there was probably a lot of things at play. Being a military brat, I hate that term, but being a military brat, we moved so much. Some of those transitions were harder than others, and I think that year must have been a really hard transition for me because I just had a really hard time connecting. And I had a teacher who had enough wisdom and insight into whatever was going on with me at the time to recognize that I needed something different than the other kids. And so she started me writing during recess. The other kids would go out to play, and she would let me stay inside, which is probably unheard of nowadays. I don't know what public school is like now, but I feel like that was a really bold move for her because it meant that she had to stay put too, because I was present in the classroom while everybody was outside. But I started writing during that time, and I entered this little story contest, and I think I won 2nd place or something. And it was the silliest story, but it was just that I felt so cared for, I think, by her in that. And she nurtured that desire that was kind of budding in me, I think, to tell stories. And then for, growing up, it kind of was more journaling. I always took creative writing classes or things like that because I love the outlet, but I didn't ever see becoming a writer as a job that I would ever do. It was just kind of I love to do it, but it's just my private thing that I love to do. But several years ago, God just moved me to a new season where I went from writing. I had a private blog that I wrote for my family members, and God just, through a whole series of weird events, moved me to writing a public blog. And then there was a book, and then, there were conferences and things like that. And it just sort of became this thing that I never necessarily had a vision for, that this was what I was going to do. I actually wanted to be a fashion designer. So like this wasn't ever my thing. But, God, I don't know. He just moved me into it. And I've been there, I've been writing, I think my blog, I think I started in like 2010. I'm trying to remember. So it's been several years that I've just kind of moved into that place. And there's just different doors that have opened along the way for speaking opportunities or publishing opportunities. And it has become the thing that I never saw myself actually doing.
I feel like that's often the case.
Right? I know. Yeah. It really is.
So tell me about your retreat.
Yes, Refine is so special to me. And it did not start out, as something, again, not anything I was ever going to do. I feel like God has sort of this pattern with me where it's like it's like that thing where you say, like, don't tell God I will never do this, because for sure that's going to be the thing that he's going to ask you to do. And I feel like I've had to learn that lesson many times. And I'm still learning it.
So you did not want to be a retreat director.
Right. No, like never on my radar. I actually at the time was looking to go on a personal private retreat, and God just interrupted my plans and really kind of spoke to my heart that I wasn't the only one who wanted a retreat. And I was not happy to hear him saying that to me. I was really kind of like, no, I'm not, no, we're not going to talk about that. I'm going on my own retreat. And through another series of kind of weird but unmistakable events, I would say I don't really believe in coincidence. I feel like when there's this chain of events of things that's happening, like that's what I believe. I don't think that they're just kind of these random happenstances that are leading you somewhere, like God is telling you something. And it was like that. It was just a very clear leading to hosting this retreat. And that was 6 years ago. And I did it. I took 24 women to a lodge here in Ohio, and we spent the weekend there, and I did not know what was going to happen. I did not have a full plan. I just knew that God had said, do it. And I knew that when I left that space on Sunday afternoon, that God had done something that was beyond anything that I could have orchestrated or could have I didn't even have a vision for it. Like I just did not know what he was going to do. And it just changed so many things for me. And it changed a lot of things for the women who attended. And so this March, I'm hosting the 5th retreat. And it's just crazy how God works.
I saw that it was sold out. So you've got something that you're doing that's pretty magical.
Well, it is special. We do a lot to make it special. I want it to be special for the women, but it really is such a work of God that I am always blown away by it myself. I really feel like I don't even know what to expect. I never know what's going to happen. I never know if we're going to, it's funny because it is sold out, and it has sold out every year, but every single time tickets go up for sale, I am always like, what if it doesn't sell? What if we don't go? Like I always go through the same thing because I really don't know what God is doing. And I don't know, is this going to be the year that he does it again? Does he want to keep doing it? So it always feels sort of like a kind of like a white knuckle, like hold on in faith and just see what God's going to do and try to be open to whatever that means. Like even if it meant that it didn't sell, like just to be open to that. Yeah. So the fact that it is sold out, I feel like is just confirmation to me that God has something in mind for those ladies. And I have a little role in that, but I feel like it's really his thing. Like I always say, I feel like his secretary, which I guess now the term would be like admin assistant. I feel like he's like, you pay the bills, you pay and do these things, set up the schedule and all that. But he's really the one that runs the retreat. Like that's really God's territory. So
well, I love that. And how brave of you to be like, I don't have a plan. This isn't even what I wanted to do, but I'm going to take these 24 women the very first time and just see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, it's been so hard. Like, I don't want to make it sound like it's this super fun, like, ooh, I get to do stuff with God. Like, it's always very scary to me. It's not something I enter into with joy even all the time. Sometimes there's just a lot of fear. I battle a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry. There's just a lot that goes into it. But at the end of the day, like when I'm in it with the Lord and we're doing this thing, I am always just so humbled by the way he works and the way he provides. And every time I'm like convicted of my fears and convicted of like the way I assume that he's not going to follow through. Again and again, I do this, but it's like I just keep learning the lesson over and over. So the fact that other people get something out of it is amazing, but I get so much out of the process of having to walk through the work of it with the Lord that is really, if nothing else, like it's worth it for me because I know he's growing me in the stretching of doing that work. So everybody else getting something out of it is like a bonus on top.
Nice. That's kind of how I feel about this. Everyone I get to talk to, I learn something from. I've gotten to meet some amazing women. So the people who listen, whatever added benefit they get is just extra. Like this, a lot of it is for me, which I feel like sounds so selfish now that I'm saying it.
No, I'm actually really glad you said that because I know there's this talk in the writing world about like writing for your readers. And I always wrestle with that because I feel like it's true. Like you want to write, you want to speak to your readers. Like I understand it in that sense. But I know for me, everything I write is really for me. And I always feel very selfish about that. I feel like, I'm just writing for myself. But I know that like that is the way that I process and learn through my faith. That's the way I walk with the Lord. Like he's walking with me through that work.
Yes.
So first and foremost, it is actually for me. And the fact that other people get something from it is such a gift. I always feel like what a privilege that he would let my experience translate to someone else and that they could be blessed through that, or they could come to know him deeper through that, because that wasn't like I didn't set out with that mission. I'm just working through my own junk with the Lord. and it's really about that for me. But I'm really glad you said that because I always feel the same way. I always feel like this is such a selfish attitude to say like write for myself. Like I don't mean it like that, but like at the end of the day, that's what it actually is,
I read an article that you wrote about turning 40. I
Mm-hmm.
turned 40 earlier this year. So I was like, I need to read this one. And you say, I will remember that I am every age I have ever been, and that seasons long past are not gone, but are the layers of a life that is still unfolding. Oh my goodness, Kris, you said it all right there. I will remember every age that I have ever been. That's so true. And sometimes I feel like I'm that 8-year-old girl or I'm that 20-year-old girl. And I wonder why, and that's why.
Yeah. I got that from Madeline L'Engle because in her book, I think it's in Walking on Water, she talks about how we are every age we've ever been. And I felt like when I first read that, it was so profound. And I'm going to try not to cry because it really moves me because you actually are. Like, you're still that 8-year-old girl. Like, you still have her. She's still a part of you. And the 6-year-old who's afraid of the dark, and the 12-year-old who's angsty, in puberty. And we're still all of these people. It's still part of our journey. It isn't gone just because we've moved out of that season. And I when I think about what she said there, I was just like, that is so true, because we are those parts of us. And I think as you grow, like as we age, and of course the 40s I think are notorious for like really coming to terms with your life. I think like late 30s through maybe like your mid 50s or something, there's this thing that happens where you sort of start looking at your life through a lens that you've just never had access to, like you haven't been that age, so you haven't seen it from that perspective. But I think what happens is those parts of you, like they still come up. Like I still feel like that girl who was afraid of her bad dreams sometimes. And I still feel like that girl who was angsty when she was, growing into womanhood and all of these things. Like she's still very much in there. And I think that there's a generosity we can extend to ourselves when we accept that we're still all of that.
Yeah, I just thought that was really beautiful. And it let me relax into who I was a little bit. Like, I have all those layers. They're all there. And it was a comforting thought.
Oh, I'm so glad. What a gift.
We are recording this and it's early November, but as this whole fall season has gone, November is going to go quickly. And this episode will come out later this month. And we are starting to think about the Christmas season. Can you even believe it?
No, I can't. I can't believe it.
So let's talk about Advent. You wrote a beautiful devotional about waiting on the Lord in this season. What made you even think about writing a book like this?
I think it actually probably started a year or so before I ended up writing it. We have this dinner time prayer that we always say that begins, "Come Lord Jesus." And every time we would say it, like there was, for a season there, it would just kind of grab me. Like I just felt like, oh my gosh, we're like inviting him to our table every night with this phrase. And I thought someday I'm going to write a book with that title. I just love that. I love that phrase and I'm going to use it. And then we moved into this house that we're in now. And we moved in January, which felt like the worst time of year to move. It just felt like, this is crazy. Why are we doing this? But that July that we were in the house, I just decided I'm gonna do Christmas in July for myself. Again, for me, like I was like, I'm just gonna write about Christmas during the month of July. And that book was really, I wrote it in the whole month of July. I wrote the whole book. I got up every morning at like 4 a.m. And that book was my personal devotional time. So like I had outlined the scriptures that I wanted to use that are typically used during the Advent season. Mm-hmm. And I just would get up and I would open to whatever that scripture was for the day. And I would write my reflection on it. And that became that book. And I mean, I think I did set out to write it as a book, but I just thought, I just need to do this. Like, I need this. I need to write through this because waiting is hard. And I am a super impatient person. It's terrible. It's not one of my strengths. I always feel so ashamed of how impatient I can be. And so I think that is my personal, one of my personal struggles. But I think as a culture, like we just really stink at waiting for things. And it's getting worse. I feel like with the increase of technology and the speed of things, we are growing less and less accustomed to waiting on anything. And I don't think that's a good thing. I mean, I think, as much as anyone, I love the convenience of instant everything. Sure. I love it. Yeah. I mean, I'm a convenience junkie. But I know that at the same time, there's something detrimental about that to my soul. So it's that weird tension of knowing like, yeah, I love that my library has a drive-through and I don't even have to get out of my car. But at the same time, like it's costing me something else to feel like I can just go, 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 and I never have to wait. Yeah. And so I think I just felt like there's probably other people who have a hard time with waiting like me. So maybe I want to speak to that space for those of us who just really stink at waiting. And I think it was just kind of born out of that and that need for me personally to kind of dig into what does that look like, especially during Advent, because Advent is that season of like this pregnant hope that we're waiting for Jesus to come. So it just felt like it all just fit so nicely together.
I was having a conversation, I think it was with my dad recently, and he said, I ordered these cookies and they took 5 days to be delivered. 5 days, and I thought, yeah, I can see how you'd want your cookies faster than that. But, that before Amazon, I think 5 days was pretty standard for shipping, yeah. Right? But we're so used to getting it right now and as fast as we can.
Yeah. I think that, it's shifted from being like a gift where you got something, if something happened quickly, we're kind of like, ooh, that's awesome. But now it's an expectation. Right. And I think that the problem that I see in that is that those kinds of things like in the worldly sense translate to our faith. And I think that it becomes an issue because if we live with an expectation of instant whatever, then the slow work of God, who is it, Pierre something, I've got to quote him, but he says, trust in the slow work of God. And you can Google that quote. I'm forgetting his name right now. But God's work it does tend to be slow in the sense that we perceive time. And I think that what I know I wrestle with personally is that slow work of God, is waiting for God to move according to his timetable rather than my own. And I think that that's where I felt like this is not just my struggle. Like this is something we are struggling with as people of faith who are trying to walk with God, who just tends to walk at a very different pace. Like, I mean, yes. That's what I found at least. Like, I'm ready to go, go, go. And he's like, no, we're going to sit here on this rock for a while. And I'm like, we don't have time to sit on the rock, God. Like, we got to move. And he's like, no, we actually don't. And I feel that tension all the time. And I think that as people of faith, it would do us good, and I'm totally speaking to myself, to slow down and to accept that with God, there so often is waiting. Like it's just a part of the journey. And if we can't make peace with that, then I think we miss out on the goodness and the gift of that waiting. Like it's actually a gift a lot of times, and I don't think we receive it as a gift. I know I don't. I'm like, this is terrible. Like this is not a gift at all.
There was a time when I was kind of procrastinating about getting a friend something. And I thought, gosh, I'm just doing a terrible job at this. Like, I really want to get it to her. And it went to her later than I thought it should have. And she finally said to me, this came at the exact right time. Like, she didn't know that I had planned to give it to her, that I was late in my thinking. But she said, no, this was the perfect gift at the perfect time. So God worked all that out. And I think that I'm in control of something, which I'm not.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that word control is such a good word, because I think that that's what waiting does, is it's that reminder that we're not in control. And I think that so many of us want so badly to be in control.
Right.
And that waiting that happens is just, sometimes it's a very jarring reminder that we don't have control, and that God's timing is so different than ours. And it's so perfect. Like your gift arriving right then, so perfectly orchestrated by Him. And I've had experiences like that too, where something has felt like it's late and, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And then it just miraculously, really, like God's timing blows my mind. And I've had that experience with reading books and certain things like that, where you feel like, I couldn't read this then, but I read it now and it was the right time. Like it just, I wouldn't have even been able to receive it in the way that I needed to if I'd done it at this other time. But waiting there's just so many times I think a gift in it, and we just don't realize it in our desire to rush and hurry and have it. We risk missing it. And I think I'm at a point in my life where, as much as I don't like the tension of the waiting, I don't want to miss it. I don't want to rush ahead of God and risk cheating myself out of something good that He's trying to do by trying to force it my way. I've learned that lesson so many times the hard way. I feel like, like I don't want to learn it the hard way anymore.
You're becoming wise.
I don't know.
In your older age,
I pray so.
Kris. So Advent to me growing up, I grew up in the church, but we did not observe Advent for whatever reason. And so to me, it was a calendar with the little chocolates. I mean, that was my kind of full understanding of, it was a countdown.
Right.
So tell me more about the background of Advent and then just the specifics of what it is.
Yeah, it is. If you go to a more liturgical church, and I have several friends who've told me that their non-denominational, non-liturgical churches are really coming to embrace more of the church calendar. I think this is a little bit of a shift we're seeing culturally.
Yes.
Which is beautiful. I love to hear that. It makes me so happy, because I did grow up in a liturgical church. And so the church calendar has always been part of my life. Advent, Lent, these seasons, Pentecost, all of these have been observed in my tradition since I was in the church. But Advent is very similar to the Lenten season, which is a designated period of kind of paying attention to where we are in our journey of waiting for Christ. Lent obviously is, the journey to the cross, and Easter, the celebration of resurrection. But Advent is very similar in that we're waiting for Jesus to be born. And so, you walk through the journey of kind of the Old Testament, the prophecy of His coming to his birth. And it is meant, I think, to draw us into like, Jesus is the whole point. There's the bumper sticker kind of like, Jesus is the reason for the season, which, we kind of like, oh, it's so cliche, but like, it's actually true. Like, He's the reason. And so Advent, I feel like, is a important season that kind of turns us like to face like, why do we need a savior? Like we walk through these stories of the Israelites and the people who were longing for Jesus to come. And then it culminates obviously with Christmas, with celebrating His birth. And so I just think I love it so much, because I think it's a good reminder. It turns us to pay attention. And I think it's very easy, especially during Christmas. It's like the worst. Right. We're getting way sidetracked and distracted with everything else. And Advent, for me personally, to observe Advent and to kind of walk through that, it grounds me in a way that it's super easy for me to just kind of go off the rails and get very distracted by the festivity and all of the things that are happening at that time of year, and kind of lose touch with what are we actually doing? Why does this really matter? And so I think it's helpful in that way. If people, are looking for something to help them kind of focus, Advent is such a great tool for that. I hate to call it that, but it is a tool. Like, you can use it as a tool to refocus your heart and center yourself on, like, what are we doing? What is this season?
Do you have some practical ways that you go about practicing it?
Yeah, it always varies year to year with what we do. We have, like I said, we have the 4 kids. And so we have tried since they were little to help them embrace Advent and to see what it is. And it's a little bit easy because our church observes it. So we have the typical practices that our church does. But then we have Ann Voskamp's beautiful Advent wreath that her son Caleb sells now through their website. So we often will put the wreath out. And we do readings. Usually we do Advent readings, and we have several different books that we use depending on the year. I always feel a little bit like a fraud because even though I wrote a book for Advent, there's so many times where, like, in the middle of everything where we're so busy, we'll have like 4 days where we don't do a reading. And I always feel like, oh my gosh, like, we're totally failing this. But then I have to remind myself, like, okay, this is not the point. The point is not that we, check the box and get it done. It's that our hearts are being turned towards it. And so, yeah, there's going to be nights where we don't light the candle and we don't do the reading, but it's okay. Like, we can all take a deep breath. Like, let's not get sidetracked by that stuff. But yeah, we try to do personal things for us as a family. Sometimes we've had a Jessie tree, sometimes we do specific activities. When my kids were younger, it was easier. Now they're like teenagers and they don't want to necessarily do the crafts,
Right.
But for little kids, like, we would do crafts and things like that each day or each week to kind of just draw us into just paying attention,
I don't have the wreath, but we have candles that we put on our mantle.
Yeah, I love that.
We also don't even try to do a daily reading, but we do every Sunday. We have a reading that we did it together as a family and lighting the candles. And even that's hard.
Yeah.
Just to have the time and the energy to be focused.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I'm honest, there's been years where, like, we haven't put the wreath out. Like, it's just been, there've been a couple, like the year we moved, for example, we started packing our house on Christmas Day, which was like,
wow.
That was our own choice. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, what were we thinking? But that year, because we knew we were trying to move, I didn't bother with it. But I felt the loss of it too. Like, if there's a season where we have been so kind of pressed that we haven't done the things, I miss it. And I don't miss it for the box checking aspect of it. I miss it because I know that that means that I'm too sidetracked, or I'm too distracted, or I'm too weighted by things outside of it. And so even that experience has made me, try to be more intentional on those years where sometimes I think, I don't want to get this stuff out. I don't want to do this. I'm tired. It's one more thing. But at the same time, there's that, that immediate thought afterwards. It's like, you do it not because you want to, but because I need it. That's why I do it, because I actually need it. So, that's going to look different for everybody, but it's important.
I feel like the older I get, the faster the years go.
Yes.
And everything keeps coming so quickly. And I'm kind of like, we just did this. We just had Christmas. How can we go about making it special every year? Or like this year, how can it be different or as meaningful as it should be?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because I feel the same way. I feel like time is moving like a freight train. And every year I feel like it's going faster, and it's not physically possible, but it feels so real.
It feels that way.
It's a phenomenon. I can't understand it, and I don't like it. It makes me I feel very rushed all the time. And I don't know, I'm still navigating that. I'm like, why do I feel this way? Why is this happening? But I think for everybody, like, you just have to figure out, like, what is it your family needs? What is going to be the way that works for you, that doesn't add to your stress? Because I think that's that could be the worst aspect of it, is if you say as a family, like, okay, we're going to try to observe Advent, and it becomes a source of contention or a source of stress, where people just feel like we can't do it. And then you have, if you're an achiever kind of personality, then you have an added sense of failure on top of it, which that, like you don't need that on top of it. So I think that for us, I know, like I said, it changes every year. How do we make it special? How do we do it? And I think everybody has to figure out, maybe for them, it's like one candle a week. And there are some, like we have one of those Advent wreaths too, where you have like the pink and purple candle and, you just light one on Sunday. And we've done those in the past. Or maybe it's like one of the things we do is we always go to the zoo and see the Christmas lights. Or we have like those traditional things where even if we don't get to all of our, all the things we like to do, we kind of decide as a family, what's the one way we want to acknowledge this year? If we're overwhelmed or if we're feeling like we don't have time, what's the one thing? And maybe it's like we're going to go to one Christmas program. And maybe that's it. Like we're going to just do that one thing. So I think everybody just has to figure out for them personally and for their family, what does it look like and what's going to bring peace with it? Because I think that the worst would be to just feel like you have to do something and then to feel like you're failing at it, or to lose the grace of that. Like there's so much grace in the season of Advent of like, it is hard to wait. It's hard to walk through it, and it's hard to juggle all the things. And so I think looking at like, what is a practice for us, or what is an event or a whatever that's going to be life-giving, that's going to be gracious, and that we can see Christ in it, And it literally every year it's something different for us. I mean, we have traditions, but it really is something different just depending on what's going on.
Hey, I'm going to jump in and interrupt my conversation here for just a minute to tell you about Prep Dish. It is a meal plan service that I've been using for about 2 years now, and it is a game changer. It's not like the services that send you food, but with this service, you get a weekly email that contains your menu for the week, an organized grocery list, and easy to follow instructions for prepping your meals ahead of time. After a couple of hours on the weekend, all of your meals are ready for the week. Okay, so prep day can be hard work, but you make this one big mess in your kitchen, and then you clean up that one big mess, and then most of the work for the week is done. Prep Dish is offering you a 2-week free trial. That way you can see what the recipes are like, try prep day out for yourself, and see how good it feels to have your meals waiting for you when it's time to eat. And if you'd like to continue after the trial, it's just $14 a month. To give Prep Dish a try for free, go to prepdish.com/Girls Talking Life. My family is eating healthier, and I have more time on the weeknights, and I'm more organized. Even if you're not planning everything, you still have an organized grocery list to get you started. It is one of my favorite parts of Prep Dish. Now back to my conversation. Kris, let's talk about your book. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
One thing that's cool, I guess, that I've heard is some people have said about the book, like, I don't know anything about Advent, or I've never done it. Like, can I use this book? And it's always been such a blessing to tell them, like, yeah, like it doesn't matter. And actually, I think the book is worthwhile outside of the Advent season, because I think it's not explicitly like a Christmas book, you know what I mean? Like, it's not just a retelling of like the Christmas story or something like that, which of course is relevant all the time. But I have had people say like they've read it in other seasons and it's really been a gift to them, because it is ultimately about the waiting. And I think, whatever you're waiting for and whatever waiting season you're in, you would find something of value there. And so I always want to encourage people, like, it doesn't matter if it's Christmas or not, like you can totally read it. And even if you've never done Advent, I always, people sometimes say like, I don't know anything about it. Like, it doesn't matter, like you don't have to. You can be guided through it, and you can look up other resources. So nobody's constrained by that, I guess.
Okay. And what could a reader expect if they wanted to go through your book?
There are daily readings. There's 24, I think. I should know this. I think there's 24 daily readings, but they can expect a daily reading, and then every reading ends with, I think I have like 1 or 2 questions for reflection and then a prayer. And it's not, I think there's a lot of pressure during Advent, like we talked about, to keep up with like a daily reading.
Yeah.
And I've had people say like, I couldn't keep up, but like, because it is about waiting in general. Like, it's okay if you miss a day. The readings aren't very long. You don't have to feel like I have to stay on top of this every single day. Like, it's fine if you don't. I've had people use it with their whole family, which I think is so awesome. It's not, I will say it's not explicitly written for like little children. And I don't mean that there's anything in there that would be objectionable. I just mean they may not grasp it. Like it may be a little over their understanding.
Sure.
But it could totally be used, I think, with kids from probably like 10 or 11 on up. I think they would be able to get something out of it. So it could be used. I've had people use it as a family. So it could be used that way. There's options.
Well, thank you, Kris. I'm just talking with you. I'm getting more excited about it.
I know. And it's going to be here before we know it.
I know. Time to get excited.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
At the end of my show, I like to ask my guests for their favorite 5.
Oh,
do you have 5 things that you are wearing or doing or eating that are your favorites right now?
Okay, yeah, 5. Oh my gosh, this is always really hard for me because I like so many things. My girls always want to pin me down and they'll say, which is your favorite, this one or this one? And I'm always like, I like them both because they're both different. So, okay, let me see if I can do 5. Okay, coffee every morning. Coffee is my favorite. I cannot start my day without my cup of coffee.
Do you have a specific
favorite
type, or what kind of coffee do you drink?
No, I don't do flavored coffees. So just like I want it fairly plain, and I gotta have my half and half. It's like, like that's it. Those are my requirements. So pretty simple when it comes to that. I think my favorite. I'm listening to several podcasts right now. My most favorite, I think, is probably a tie between Out of the Ordinary podcast with Lisa Jo Baker and Christy Purifoy and Emily Freeman's Next Right Thing, which I know, like, that's 2. That's not one favorite, but it's a tie.
There are no rules here, Kris.
Okay, good. Because I'm going to break them all anyways. Let's see, a third favorite. I love autumn. Autumn is my favorite season. We are in it. And I am trying to just soak it up, even though it feels like it's passing way too quickly, as we talked about last night. It was like sub-zero. It was so stupidly cold, but we're gonna still have some autumn, and so autumn is my favorite season of the year. So that's my third. My 4th favorite is my AirPods. That's a silly thing, but they have changed my life because I love to listen to podcasts or sermons or things like that. And it has like made it so I can move through my house when I'm doing dishes or laundry or whatever to just pop those in and listen. So I love my AirPods.
You're not the first guest to say that.
Am I not? Oh,
no,
good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. It feels so like petty and like silly, but it's a real thing. Like, I love them. And I think my 5th, I'm on number 5, right? I can't count.
Yes.
Is probably the books I'm reading. And I can't pick one, but just I'm reading a handful of books. I read more than one at the same time. And I'm reading a handful of books right now that are so encouraging and just wonderful. I guess if I could pick one, it would be Eugene Peterson's Long Obedience in the Same Direction. I've read it before. I've read it a couple times. My copy's super marked up, but I'm reading it again. And I love that book so much. It is it's in my top 10 of all time. It is so good.
You actually gave me a book recommendation via Instagram.
Ooh.
You had recommended Sean Smucker's Light from Distant Stars.
Oh, so good.
So my name means light from a distant star.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I saw that on your Instagram feed and I'm like, oh my goodness, I really need to read this.
Yeah, it's like a book for you. It's literally for you.
I just finished it. So good.
It is so good. Had you read anything by Sean Smucker before?
No,
He's one of my favorites. I feel like he's just such a soulful writer, and I just appreciate his voice out there in the writing world so much. So I'm so glad you enjoyed it. That's awesome. I love it. It's so good.
Thanks for the recommendation. Kris, what's next for you? I think I saw that you just finished writing another book.
Yes, I sort of like eked it out into the public. It's not up for sale yet, but I just finished it. I'm in the editing process right now, and it'll be out. I haven't set a firm deadline. I'm publishing it myself, so it's going to be out probably within the next couple months. There's some work I have to do behind the scenes to get it ready, and I'm really kind of actually just praying through like when is a good time to put it out. But yes, I did just finish it, and I'm excited and terrified to share it. So,
are you sharing what it's about?
Yeah, it's about surrender, which is like, I read, I think it was Eugene Peterson's sons. One of them said to him, you have one sermon and that's what you preach on every week. And it wasn't an insult, but I think it's very true. I feel like we each have kind of this one thing that's sort of our, I don't know, like a life theme or something that God just brings to the surface. And for me, it has been surrender. And it's been the hardest journey with the Lord through it. But when I look at the things that I'm drawn to, the things that I tend to talk about, the things that I tend to teach on, it's like that's the theme. It's always the theme. And so this is like the book that I was trying to get away from. Like I felt like, oh, I don't want to write that book. It's going to be so hard. And it has been very hard, but I couldn't not write it, you know.
What kind of things did the Lord teach you through writing the book?
I feel like I'm always learning lessons about trusting him specifically. I think we have a very short-term memory loss. And I feel like when I read through the Old Testament and you look at the journey of specifically like the Israelites and really any of the people who were walking intimately with the Lord, our propensity to forget his goodness and to forget his faithfulness, like just 5 steps outside of some amazing thing that he's done. And already we're like, oh, he's not going to do it. He's going to fail me. And I feel like that's sort of been my own process through the writing, is just feeling a lot of fear and anxiety that God is somehow going to just decide in the middle of this process that he's kind of done. And I need to just figure out how to finish it because he's moving on. And it's so ridiculous. Like I know in my head, that's so not how God works. But when I'm in the middle of that work, that feels very real. That fear that God will decide that he's kind of over it. And I just need to figure it out. But it also obedience. Like, you know, if God lays something on your heart, and this book was so heavily laid on my heart years ago. It's been a many year process getting to this point. That has been really hard because there's been seasons where I've worked on it diligently and seasons where I've sort of just kind of been like, I'm not going to do this right now. I'm not going to work on this. And so that obedience to like, no, he's asking this of you and you need to do it. You know, you're not going to actually feel peace or freedom unless you do what God's asking you to do ultimately. And I don't think we like to hear that as a culture. I think we're so independent. We don't need to listen. We don't need to be obedient. Nobody likes the word obedience, but it's a real word and it's a real thing. And that process has been hard because as much as I like to think, oh, I'm super obedient and I'm like, I love the Lord, I trust him, like all of that stuff is really put to the test when you're asked to do something that's hard. I feel like that's where God really just strips you bare a little bit and says, let's see, like, will you really do this thing? Will you really go here for me? And I can't honestly say that I'm always willing. And so coming to terms with that is a lot of work. And I think that's at least partly why the process has been so long and slow for me to finish this book, because I've just wrestled hard with the Lord over it. And that stinks, you know, like I wish I could say like, I just jumped in there with both feet and I just did it. I was so on it. And it's like, no, I came to it kind of kicking and screaming in some seasons. So,
but that probably all fits into the process, the waiting, you know?
I think if you have any credibility with nonfiction, like you don't get to write about it unless you live it. You know, fiction, you can make up whatever story you want, but if you're writing about true things, you cannot write about them unless you do it. And I have found that to be very true. And it's so unfortunate because that's, you know, like you want to just kind of stand over it and write about it like from up here, like, no, I didn't have to actually walk through that stuff. I just can talk about it. But like, no, you can't. You can't talk about it unless you do it. And I feel like there have been many pauses in the process of writing where I have seen in the midst, and it's this weird sense, almost like when you're having a dream and you know you're dreaming, it's this weird sense of like, I'm in the middle of a struggle over something. And at the same time, I am fully aware that God is deliberately allowing me to walk through this because I cannot take the next step in my writing about surrender unless I learn this lesson here on the carpet right now. You know, I'm going to have to do it. And it is so awkward because I know it and I'm resisting it at the same time, which just feels like how is this even possible to be doing these things? But it is a very real experience for me personally. That's what it looks like. And so, you have to live it.
And I think that's our humanity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard to invite people into that. It's hard to say to somebody, this is worthwhile. And I think that's where I've really wrestled, is that surrender is a really hard thing. I mean, I used to think that I was so good at loving the Lord and all of that, until God really just showed me like how much I sucked at it, but not in a like a condemning way. It was the sweetest kind of like revelation of like, there's so much more for you if you would just go here with me. Like if you would really go here with me. And it's very hard to extend that invitation to people, because I think initially our reaction is like negative or hesitant, or we don't really believe that it's going to be good for us or that it's going to turn out good. And we don't know if it's going to turn out good. Like hard things happen, Yeah. It doesn't always have a happy ending. Sometimes it's hard, but ultimately the ending is good because God is fully present in it. So even if it doesn't work out the way we initially wanted, it doesn't mean it was a failure. It doesn't mean that God failed us. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the wrestling always. It's like, what does successful surrender look like? It's hard. Oh gosh, it's hard.
Kris, where can people find, let me actually say the title of your book, Come, Lord Jesus, The Weight of Waiting.
It is available on Amazon. You can get it for Kindle or in print.
Okay. And then you said in the next few months, your book on surrender will be coming out?
Yes, I'm hoping that'll be available more widely. For sure, it'll be on Amazon, but I'm not exactly sure where else yet. So it'll be available for Kindle too, Kindle and print.
Okay.
But I'll definitely share more about that if people go to my website, KrisCamealy.com, or Instagram. I'm on Instagram, and I'm probably right now in this season, I'm most active on there of all the places. But for sure, there'll be news about it when it gets closer.
Okay. And then Refine is all sold out for March.
Yes.
Is that an annual retreat, or do you have a few a year?
It is an annual retreat, and we will release tickets for 2021, which sounds so far away, but it's not. We'll release those tickets probably at the end of March or the beginning of April.
Okay.
And that's available at refineretreat.com. So that's a really easy website to remember. And all of the information will be put up there first. And there's a subscribe block on there. So if people want to subscribe, then they'll get notified when the tickets are available if it's something they're looking at attending.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing parts of your story with us. I am more interested in being ready to celebrate the season after talking with you. I feel ready to kind of embrace the waiting.
That's so good. Yeah, me too. I hope so. Me too. I want to embrace it. I know, I want to do it. My spirit wants to do it. My flesh is weak, but I want to do it.
I want to plan ahead for success, not to check off the boxes, but because I want to be able to sit in the story and feel the meaning and the waiting and the ultimate presence of Jesus. Yeah.
Well, as you said, that sit in the story, that I just love that so much, because I think that waiting can feel like such a negative thing, but like sitting in the story, I love the way you phrase that, because that is not a negative thing, to sit in the midst of the waiting. Like, we're not waiting alone. We're actually waiting with the Lord for the Lord, which is so weird. But we are, he's present now, present then, and will be. And so we're in the midst of it with him. And I love that, sitting in the story. I'm going to hold on to that.
That's actually Alexander Kirkendall's phrase. I grabbed that from her. But
I love it. So good.
All right, Kris, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great talking with you.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kris. She is so good at speaking to some of the internal struggles we all have, but I hope she encouraged your heart. I hope that you are feeling more ready to dig into the Christmas story and to enjoy the anticipation and even sit in the waiting. You can find more from Kris on her website, KrisCamealy.com, and you can sign up to be contacted with details about Refine at refineretreat.com. And friends, go grab Kris's book, Come, Lord Jesus, The Weight of Waiting. Ironically, thanks to Amazon, you can have it in your hands in just a day or two. plenty of time for Advent. I would love for you to rate and review the show on iTunes or tell a friend about it this week. I would love for more women to be encouraged by the stories of my guests. Next time on the show, I am talking with Krista Gilbert. Krista is a speaker and author of Reclaiming Home, A Family's Guide for Life, Love, and Legacy, co-author of Focus on the Families, Give Them Wings, and the co-host of the Open Door Sisterhood podcast. Krista joins me to chat about the importance of family traditions and meaningful gift giving. I just love the warmth and enthusiasm Krista brings to the conversation, and I know you will too. Friends, don't let the conversation stop when the show is over. Share your stories and start your own conversations with the girls in your life. Have a great Thanksgiving, and I'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Thanks for tuning in.